Hi, Alan Stratton from woodturning. When I do a demonstration of the octagon method for a perfect sphere, sometimes people ask, well, now that you have a sphere, what do you do with it? Well, the answer is anything you want. Actually, at this year's AAW symposium, Laurent Niclot, I believe it's pronouncing it, turned a sphere and then carved it into a shape and hollowed it. And so this is another thing you can do with a sphere once you make it with the octagon method. What do you do with this? Well, I don't know. What do you call it? Well, I'm open to ideas also for that one, but still, it is a carved hollow form for now. Let's turn it.
This wood came from a neighbor's cherry tree several years ago. At that time, I took a couple of the smaller trunks that were too small for bowls, mounted them on the lathe, and turned them into nice cylinder blanks. I sealed them and let them dry for just such a project as this one. With a wood clamp to prevent the cylinder from spinning, I sawed off an appropriate length on the bandsaw. The clamp is sufficient to prevent a serious injury. Now, with my smaller piece mounted on the lathe and the cylinder trued up again, I can trim the ends in preparation. I have calculated the key measure for the octagon method. These are 0.293 times the diameter for the distance from the corner of the cylinder to the corner of the octagon, and 0.414 times the diameter for the length of any side of the octagon. Please see my other videos for a more complete explanation. For now, I am turning down the ends to tenons with a diameter equal to the length of a side. As an alternative, I could mark this same measure on the top end of the cylinder. However, since I do have some extra length to waste off, I chose this way. When the cylinder top and bottom are established, I can measure along the side of the cylinder for the corner measure. It helps me to extend these marks around the cylinder. Then cut corners. This is from the corner of that tenon to the mark on the side of the cylinder. As I cut the line, I sight on the distance from my cut to the line on the cylinder side and try to keep that equal to the distance from the cut line to the corner of the tenon. Eventually, this distance goes to 0, and therefore my line is a good 45-degree slope. After this cut is completed, I reduce the tenon diameter by about half. This is now my octagon that contains my sphere. For an even better approximation for the sphere, I divide each side in half and then half again on the exposed sides. Then cut corners again, from line to line. Technically, these are 22.5-degree lines, but these are only approximate because now I can round the sphere by eye. It is not perfect yet, but it is substantially closer than if I did not use the octagon as a guide. Lastly, I reduce the tenons to small nubs, keeping the cut a little away from the true sphere to prevent wood from tearing out from the good sphere. I search for a pair of cup centers for the next step, but I am missing one. Not a problem. I grab a wood faceplate and cut a cup shape to receive the sphere. I will use this one again next time. Now the rough sphere is mounted between the cup centers with the nubs at the equator line. With a spindle gouge, I start by gently trimming off the nubs before refining the sphere with cuts, shear cuts, or scrapes. After marking the new equator, I rotate the sphere in the cup centers. While not required, I keep the old nub still in the new cutting zone. Again, I shear cut or scrape while keeping my eye on the ghost image at the top of the sphere. That ghost needs to go away. While 3 turns should be enough, I am not happy. Perhaps my new cup center was larger than required. Not a problem. I will simply rotate it and repeat one more time. Coarse sanding with 80 grit paper is an essential cutting step. Instead of a metal tool, I use a strip of sandpaper through 3 rotations. Since this will be carved, I'm stopping with 80 grit. Normally, I would repeat with each finer grit. Now to hollow my sphere. I'm mounting the sphere into my DIY donut chuck. First, I'm boring the main hole. This establishes the access hole and prepares for hollowing by removing wood more easily than with a hollowing tool. Not much to see while hollowing. My access hole is large enough that I only need a straight tool with a small carbide cutter. I recently attended SWAT and listened in as a vendor described his donut chuck. Now, do not get me wrong, I am impressed with his donut chuck. However, as he talked, he made comparisons to the worst possible DIY donut chuck. So I will counter now by describing my DIY donut chuck, which he would have a tough time comparing to. He describes the swords of death, referring to the bolts that hold the chuck parts together. 2 points here. My DIY chuck uses only 3 bolts, since 3 is easier to balance than 4. Next, my kit has several lengths of bolts so that I can use one sized to the project. They never protrude. Another statement he made was that you need to remake the top plate for each project. That is partially true. However, mine uses inserts for the final sizing. If necessary, I make a new insert, but never have to make a new top plate. Plus, since the base plate is wood, it has a mortise in the middle. I have made several different cup centers as necessary to keep the project centered. Each new one adds to my library of possibilities for reuse. My top and bottom plates are solid wood. The bolt heads are recessed into the top plate so that they never protrude above the top plate. The bottom plate contains T-nuts for a solid grip. Any extra length is between the bottom plate and the headstock. As noted earlier, I choose bolt length to match the project and minimize the protrusion. Even then, there is never any activity below the bottom plate, so this is my rebuttal. If you want his chuck, it is a good product, but now you can make a fair, honest comparison. With the sphere now hollow, I have it on a tenon faceplate while I mark it out. I want 7 ribs, thinking that it would be more organic than an even number. But 7 makes layout more difficult. However, I do not want precision anyway. I'm eyeballing arcs and adjusting them until I'm happy. Now for the dusty, dirty work. My dust collector is running and a fan is blowing at my back. After all, it is hot also. I'm starting with a large disc rasp on a pneumatic tool. My original electric angle cutter bit the dust. This tool cuts valleys between the ridges. It is a good way to remove a lot of wood. Next, I switch to a smaller rotary cylinder rasp. With this tool, I can remove the sharp corners left by the previous cutter. I work gradually up to the layout lines in multiple passes. To smooth out some of the roughness, I mount an abrasive wheel in a drawbar collet on my lathe. The drill press is also a good option. Since this is my first hollow form of this style, I will not enhance it any further. Instead, how about some black rattle can lacquer? So, what does it do? At least it is getting you to ask what it does. Does it have to do anything to be an art piece? I like it, but it'll probably not make another exactly like it. However, after seeing a good demo, I feel compelled to try it out and see where it leads. And stay tuned for that. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my website because my notifications are more reliable than YouTube's. Please tell your friends about my weekly videos. I appreciate your comments and questions. Please wear your full face shield whenever the lathe is running. This is my best safety tip.